Violence between Israel and Hamas continues over the weekend. Here in the U.S., the new U.S. Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, says the House will vote this week on more than $14 billion of aid for Israel. Now, it comes as Israel stepping up that ground presence in Gaza. Bloomberg's Nick Wadhams joins us now with more from Washington. Is the $14 billion a done deal?
I think at this stage, it really is. The only question is going to be whether Democrats put up a fight because they want about $60 billion in Ukraine aid to be joined with that. And, there's going to be a question there where, if they don't approve the Israel aid, they're going to look bad. But they really do not want to separate that from the Ukraine aid. But it's a near certainty that either way, the Israel aid will go through.
Nick, does it come with strings attached? Does it come with policy strings attached? At the moment, the U.S. is giving Israel a fairly free hand. Do you think that could change?
Well, I think behind the scenes, you are seeing the Biden administration try to exert some leverage. So there is the theory out there. We've had that confirmed with some reporting that basically what Biden did was give Bibi a big hug, a big embrace at the beginning, and that then created space for him to sort of quietly behind the scenes say, okay, listen, you've got to consider the human toll, the humanitarian situation in Gaza, the civilian casualties. But certainly at this point, it's looking pretty unrestrained. The ground invasion has not that sort of as maximalist as we had feared, but in some ways certainly pretty intense.
So I'm just wondering how the aid then plays out and if there'll be sort of strings attached because of that, either more trucks into Rafah.
I don't think you're going to see any strings attached to that aid. I mean, this is unlike the Ukraine situation where a lot of Republicans are saying, listen, we need to have a lot more accountability in terms of how that money is spent. But really, the Israel aid, no, there's not going to be a big link between the policy. I mean, the bipartisan support for Israel is so big, and that money is really going to be spent mostly on defensive systems so that Israel has the ability to defend itself from incoming rocket attacks from both Hamas and from Hezbollah in Lebanon.
Nick, is the clock, though, ticking? How much time does Israel have? How much? You talk about the support that Israel has in D.C. I think that's unquestioned at this point. But is there a clock ticking around that support? Does it degrade over time?
Well, I think what you're going to see, not so much a degradation of support from the U.S. in terms of money and from the vocal administration support, from President Joe Biden himself. But what you are going to see is more pressure to put a focus on aid going into Gaza from Egypt, more concern about civilian casualties. I mean, Bibi setting the expectations there, saying this is going to be a long war. So he really wants to go, as long as necessary to get rid of Hamas. And right now, they're giving a very open time frame of saying 6 weeks to 6 months. So I suspect it's going to be several more months before you really start to see this administration say, okay, we need to wrap this thing up.
Right. Which, of course, is then you're getting into election year. So what do we need to see from Ukraine to get maybe more support and more bipartisan support?
Well, it's a great question because there's not really a lot of clarity on what Ukraine actually can do there. I mean, you do have Republicans saying that they believe Ukraine should get the funding, but they really want to see this issue of accountability, so making sure that money is well spent. But, I'm not really sure how much Volodymyr Zelensky can actually do to provide that sort of accountability aside from reassurances. I mean, a lot of the way that money is being spent is through U.S. weapons systems and the ability to purchase weapons from U.S. defense contractors. So it's not like money is just being funneled into Ukraine. It's much more coming in terms of weapons systems.